Hello again, and another edition of the Gray Falcon Values of Control. And this one is going to be an answering of a very constructive and a very interesting segment of Coleman Hughes's Conversations with Coleman Hughes. He spoke with a gay man about the question of why more LGBTs, gay men, and Latinos, and black folks might have supported Donald Trump this time. And for a lot of people who are in the anti-MAGA column, that might seem very strange. But to me, it doesn't seem strange at all. It seems it seems like a very effective campaign has been waged on the part of certain people in support of Trump to speak to something that people who maybe don't support Trump are still listening to. And basically on the segment, Coleman Hughes and his guests discussed how a lot of people are just tired of being told they have to experience reality as victims, and how they have to be told, they discussed how a lot of white men who are like gay men are tired of being told they're the problem, and how I've seen the social media accounts of people posting things like white men are trash, or white men are racist or the oppressors, and there was a lot of really hardcore anti-Buttigieg stuff coming from certain more liberal LGBT folks who felt like he wasn't good enough to represent the modern justice ideology of the LGBT movement. And I really think that they really were onto something, and they really were getting into some interesting stuff, and I kind of want to get into some of the history of why I think right now many younger black men may have gravitated towards Trump in higher numbers than people would have expected. Um, when we're looking at the data, it so far, averaging them out, it looks to be like they said about that Donald Trump got about 80. That Donald Trump got about 18% of black men, but he also got about 8 to 9% of black women. So Donald Trump doubled his share. Donald Trump increased his share of the black vote from 8 to 12 or 13%. I'm not seeing that necessarily he entirely doubled it, but and even though he did so, because more black people came out and vote, the black margins that Joe Biden held helped him more than they helped Hillary Clinton. So let's make no mistake, the black voting numbers still push Joe Biden over the edge, and black men voted for Joe Biden about an 80% clip, whereas white women voted for Biden at only, around a 41% clip, 42% clip. So that's something to be very clear about. And just real quickly before we get into the other things, there were people, and it's very interesting because there were a lot of liberal white women I saw posting things saying that the New York Times and a few others claim that only 47% of white women voted for Trump in 2016. And what they were doing is they were playing a trick. You know, you see a lot of these tricks being played. Basically, what they were doing is because there was a third party involved, they were attempting to suggest that, it was a plurality and not a majority. But, I'm looking at the data, and basically, not to get too into it because I covered it in another segment, according to their data, 8% of white women voted third party. When you do the math, that would make white women 66% of the third party vote. That's not possible. There's no way that that's going to be the case. the data was clear that um, only about half of Jill Stein and about half of Gary Johnson's voter support were women. So you'd have that's completely inconsistent with their fundamental base structure. And as since 1992, white women have been in the low to mid 50s voting for Republican. The suggestion that somehow all of a sudden it went down to 47%, no. So the 55% you're seeing from white women this year, does it make sense to me? Of course it does. I mean, in a time in which you're running around calling white women Karen for refusing to comply with basic American foundations, opening their business, going to take their kid to the park. Um, you saw the video of the young white woman being arrested, and these are things that generally aren't going to happen to white women who live in Ladue or Frontenac. The demonization of people for being white women. You can sit there and talk about white women are the oppressors, and that's all fine and good, except the reality is that they're not going to vote against their interests, and they're not going to vote in favor of a party that seems to be under capture of a movement that denigrates just about every identity. It's to the point where there's no identity that isn't considered the bad guy by this modern critical race, intersectional, whatever you call it. And that's why every group other than white men likely moved in the direction of Trump slightly. I didn't vote for the dude because I just can't do it. I just can't deal with his lack of intellectual investment in problems. And unlike most Republicans, I don't really see him as being an opponent of the COVID-19 regime. I think he tried to take whatever position he needed to take to preserve his own personal situation. I don't think he had any principled position on it. Um, I don't think he cares about liberty or cares about any of that stuff. I think that he would have been glad if he could have wore a mask and won. He would have wore a mask from day one. He was trying to do what he thought he needed to do. But the thing about Trump, and Coleman Hughes and his guest pointed, the best way they described it is Donald Trump was a middle finger to this social justice ideology that has become commodified, and it's become institutionalized, and it's become fused with a corporate experience. It's become fused. You see the NFL people running around with the Black Lives Matter stuff on their jersey. When most people with sense, and most of the young black men I know are like, and they don't mean that. They don't care about that. I don't know a single young black man I work with that was in the least bit impressed by seeing all that junk on the NBA players' jerseys. So when you get into, well, why did young black men move in the direction of Trump? I think that most young black men are agnostic, but part of that reason, I believe, is because there's no place in the modern liberal ideology for a straight young black man. I think, the data shows that the older black men stayed pretty consistent to the Democratic Party. And there are various reasons for that. Part of those are economics. Older black men tend to have a little bit more money, and they have an experience in the past where the Democratic Party was connected to more integral aspects of